Hey guys, this is Chelsea. Welcome to my channel. Today we're talking about Inside Out 2. It's a very star-studded cast, but there will be spoilers in here, and this is going to be more of an analysis and not so much as a review, so it'll be a bit wordy and a bit long, so let's go ahead and get into it. So we start with Riley. She just turned 13 years old, and she's coming from middle school, moving into high school, and she loves her two best friends, but unfortunately they're going to a different high school, so she's dealing with that loss. And she's also trying to get on this new hockey team for high school. So she's meeting new friends, meeting the captain, and she's basically in a new environment for this 3-day hockey camp. And her parents are very supportive. They're trying to help her along, but puberty hits, of course, and that just causes you to be completely out of whack. You're kind of lost in all of your emotions. You can't really describe any of them. You just know that you're feeling them, and everything just kind of comes out at once. So she's dealing with a lot with her body, with trying to hold all of these new experiences and also trying to navigate life in San Francisco. And yeah, it's complex, but of course this is Inside Out, this is Pixar, and they do an amazing job of creating a world in which we experience all the emotions, and they're just very creative in expressing what it is to be human and humanity, and how difficult it really is to experience this life that we all lead. So these new emotions move in, they get an upgraded console at the control center. And so the new emotions are boredom, we have nostalgia coming in there sometimes, we have embarrassment, envy, and then finally the main character is anxiety. Gotta love her. So anxiety moves in, and she's sort of the main character now. So Joy is kind of like being pushed out a little bit. Anxiety comes in, she's represented with like really big teeth, which I feel like is spot on. It really captures the nervousness and the anxiety, and really like the feeling of feeling nervous all the time and not knowing what's going to happen. So anxiety moves in, she takes control of the center, and she's trying to keep all the balls in the air. She's trying to give Riley a new personality so that she can be, the star of the new team and like make all these friends. And she's not trying to be bossy about it, but she's just very much like trying to control things so that she can perhaps give Riley a better future. So the new emotions very much suppress the old emotions. They are put in this jar, and they are sent out into Riley's kind of brainscape. And so the whole point of the movie is for the old emotions to come back to the control center and to have some sort of semblance of harmony among all the new emotions and the old emotions as well. At this time, Riley is also developing her sense of self. So she has this idea of like her being a good person, her being a good friend, like all these very positive things. And that's because Joy is kicking all the cringy moments out of the control center. So she sends all her cringy moments at the end of the day to the back of her mind so she can kind of forget about it. And she only keeps the good things. So when all these new emotions come in and she's really grappling with what it is to be a good person and what really it is to be Riley, that sort of like gets pushed down a lot. Her sense of self is very much lost, also because anxiety is trying to make her into a completely new person, right? And so as Riley's developing the sense of self, like I said, only the positive ones are kept in, and that makes it more difficult for her to live her life, right? Because I feel like as kids, we're all taught what a good person is, and then when new emotions come in, like being selfish or perhaps being evil at times, like all of these things are coming in, and it's really hard to compensate for those because you've been told your whole life just like be a good person, right? And so when these new emotions come in, it's like, what do you do with that? How do you reconcile that with being a good person, with being who you are? And it all just gets really like fuzzy and really messed up. And so it becomes really hard for Riley to accept all these different parts of herself. And that's also part of the film, like I think overall, is accepting all these parts of yourself because they are all necessary, and they make you well-rounded as a person, and they give you this sort of humanity, and it helps you realize that there is nuance with people, right? No one is all good all the time, no one is all bad all the time. Like, we're very complex creatures, and I feel like when you're a kid, it's really important to remember that so that you can love yourself fully and also love others fully, and to not only feel like if someone messes up then they should be like kicked out of your life, or that they're now a bad person because they did this bad thing, right? Like, for example, for me growing up, I was always told that I had like a really high moral compass because I imagined the world as like this utopia basically, and like how people should act or how they should be. But when I did that, I found that that put too much pressure on myself, right? Like, no one can be that all the time, especially as a child. Like, that's just way too much for someone to have on their shoulders. And so Riley is also going through this discovery as well, because she has friends that she like kind of puts on the back burner while she's making these new friends. And even though her motivation is like for her future self to be with these new people, she's also losing her sense of self because she's losing her best friends who at this point in her life are a very big part of it, right? Because when you're a kid, your family, and they said this in the film, like the family island is sort of smaller and the friends island is sort of bigger because you're wanting to be accepted, you're wanting to make a community, you're wanting to be around people who are similar to you. And so this is a lot to sort of juggle in the air, which is why anxiety is at the forefront for Riley at this point in her life. So the first movie, we see Joy basically at the control center. She's trying to keep Riley on track with having a peaceful life, being happy, and just being really like upbeat all the time. And then we see sadness comes in, and she's really integral part of Riley's life too, because without sadness, we really can't experience joy, right? Because sadness comes in and she's letting Riley know what parts of her need attention, and then joy can kind of rise from there. In the second movie, it's really kind of disheartening because Joy talks about how maybe like when you get older, you forget that joy exists and like you don't really need joy as much. But we know like as adults, joy is always needed, of course, but it's just easier to forget that it exists because we have families to take care of, we have jobs, we have bills to pay, and it's just easier to forget that joy like is even a thing. But like when you're a kid, you just experience joy, and it's just something that's, it's just kind of there. When you're a kid, you don't question why it's there, you just know that you are experiencing it. And I really do feel like joy is the cornerstone in which like kids live their lives, and they just like don't judge themselves, and they just love what they love, and they're not really questioning any of it, right? But I think when you get older, it's like hard to remember that joy is there basically. And so there's this point in the film when Joy is like, maybe she doesn't need me, like maybe I'm just not necessary at all. And then there's this like really special moment where like I cry at this point, but when Riley is like calling in Joy, and then sadness is like, Joy, I think Riley wants you, you know. And like when Joy comes in is when she's able to just like play hockey and have fun and be a kid and not worry about making the team or worry about making friends. And she's just like able to focus on the happiness that she feels when she plays hockey, and she remembers why she started in the first place and why she loves the sport that she plays. And so that was just like such a beautiful moment. But one thing I really want to point out with Riley experiencing all these emotions now is that she's able to experience all these emotions and express herself because she has parents that are making her safe, right? Like when Riley is first experiencing puberty, she wakes up and she's anxious about starting the camp, and her mom walks in and she's like, why aren't you packed yet? And then Riley's like, oh my God, I'm terrible, I'm like such a bad person. And she just like freaks out. And then her mom, instead of like yelling at her or belittling her feelings, is like, okay, this is weird. Like, cause she knows Riley's sense of self too, right? So she's like, Riley, what's going on? And she comes to her at a very human level, because at that moment, her mom is like a safe place for Riley to just be Riley and to express whatever she wants to express. And so her parents being a safe space for her is really what enables Riley to have this really complex emotional landscape, and to go through life with her parents and to tell them how she's feeling, and really just to express herself in the most open way possible. And if her parents did not have that safe space for her, I don't think Riley would be able, like, this movie would not exist basically. If like her parents like were not grounded and were not a place for her to come to, then this movie really wouldn't exist. Because like when you're a kid and you express yourself, if you are shut down or someone comes in and is like, you shouldn't feel this way, like it's very difficult for you to express yourself in front of that person later on, right? Because they are not an emotionally safe person for you. So I just really commend like the Pixar production for making Riley's parents a part of her life, and to also like show what's going on in their mind when they're experiencing Riley. But really, like, it is important to have parents that allow you to be who you are. And so I just feel like that's a really important part of this film as well. Another interesting part of this movie that I thought was really cool was when in the beginning, when the original emotions are sleeping, they're like on the little separate bunks, and I would expect Joy to be the center of this like sleeping arrangement, but it's actually Anger who's in the center, which I did not really catch on to before, if that was in the first movie or not. I don't really remember. But yeah, anger being at the center I thought was really interesting, because when I think of anger, at least for myself, it's kind of like a secondary emotion. Like I feel anger when I don't have boundaries set up for myself, or like it's like another emotion happens, like if I'm ignoring my sadness or if I'm ignoring my fear, then the anger comes out for me. And whereas like the other emotions, like sadness is pretty immediate, like joy is pretty immediate, but so anger being at the center, I feel like allows you to see like where other parts of your life are perhaps out of whack. And so I just thought that was really cool. That's just how I express anger, or how I've noticed my anger. I know that some people just feel it immediately and like they can engage with it right away, but for me it's just like it's kind of like a delayed effect. So I thought that was really cool that anger was the center and then the other emotions were surrounding him. But what I also really liked is that all the emotions were not strictly anger or strictly sadness. Like I feel like they sort of mingled with each other and there was a lot of overlap, which I think also ties into the nuance that I mentioned before with emotions, and how Riley is really trying to navigate that a lot can be felt at once. And now that there's a lot of emotions now, she can feel a lot at once, and which is why puberty is like so horrifying, but also so important to one's development, is just like being able to hold that space for all of them at the same time. And when Riley's sense of self comes back to the control center and like there's like this whirlwind with anxiety, Joy actually goes in and talks to anxiety and is like, we can't control what Riley is, we can't control what she'll experience in her life or what kind of person she'll turn out to be. And so like that's Joy's way of bringing anxiety out and like stopping anxiety. And then when Riley's sense of self is starting to come back, the emotions go and hug her sense of self as like a way to accept all parts of her and to not suppress any of it. And then anxiety can also come in and hug her. And just, I thought that was a really beautiful moment too, because like it shows that all these emotions are necessary, right? They are all important to whatever situation we are feeling. Like anxiety serves a purpose too, because it does help you to think of possible ways that things could happen. And sadness is necessary, of course. Like all these parts of your emotions are absolutely important to who you are, and like all of them hugging her sense of self was just like really reinforcing the idea that all of your parts can be loved. And the last point I want to make about this film, just like one little last bit of analysis here, is in the first movie we have this imagination that Riley has, and it's represented as this fort. And so she like dreams that she's able to fantasize about her life and like crushes that she has, or like boy bands or whatever. And in this movie I thought was brilliant because this fort still exists, the imagination still exists, but anxiety moves in essentially, and she has like all these different pods, these different cubicles, and there's different parts of Riley that are thinking of things that could go wrong. And so they are projections, they project into the screen, and then it shoots to the control center where anxiety can see all these projections. And she just has basically like little minions working to think about all these different obstacles that Riley can face. And I just thought that was such a good way to represent imagination being used against you, because like, yeah, you're still imagining things, but you're imagining everything that could go wrong and really not a lot that can go right. And so when Joy and the other emotions come into this part of Riley's landscape, they are trying to convince the workers to think of things that could go right and happy things that Riley could experience. And I just feel like that was such a creative way to represent anxiety and how it can be used against you. But yeah, I mean, overall, this movie is just super creative, and I just love how they're representing just what it is to be human and like humanity, and how difficult it is to like really experience all these things at once, especially like in the mind of a child. To hold all of that happening in your tiny little body is just like an experience unlike anything else. And so yeah, anyway, those are all the points I had to make. Thank you so much for watching if you're still here to the end. And yeah, that's my analysis of Inside Out 2. I highly recommend you guys go see it, and thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.